Hi everyone, thank you very much for attending today. My name's Ian and I'm a junior consultant with Turner and Townsend. And we're joined today by Natalie, who is a project manager. This is a Retrofit Information Support and Expertise event, which is fully funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero and is being delivered by Turner and Townsend.
Thanks very much, Ian. So just to get started with the agenda and what we're going to be looking at today, do a quick introduction and then about understanding risk. This session is really focused on risk culture and risk attitudes, being proactive in risk management rather than reactive. But we are also going to look at some of the processes that can be used in risk management as well. We'll have a look at some case studies of how we can turn risk into opportunities and view it in a positive light. And then we'll wrap up with a summary. I'll point you to some resources and we'll finish with a Q&A. So first things first, I'll just do a very quick introduction. So my name's Natalie Oldham and I'm a project manager at Turner and Townsend in our real estate team. I am currently a DSM on TAF 2. I work with local grant recipients, but my background is in project management. So most of my experiences in public sector, I used to work for a local authority, and my experiences in heritage-led regeneration. I've worked on projects such as Broadfield Park Slopes, which was the discovery of a Georgian water management system which posed a flooding risk. Reimagining Tate, which is the gallery on Albert Dock in Liverpool, and the restoration of Rochdale Town Hall, which is one of the finest examples of neo-Gothic architecture in our country. And so working on projects, that um, within the heritage sector, they pose a high level of risk, which is why I'm going to be hosting this workshop today. I've worked with a variety of teams, different expertise, and I work on projects which focus towards driving community-focused results. That's where my passion is. So it's a pleasure to be working on the TAF 2 programme with RISE. In terms of why we're here, one of the common things that I come across in my day-to-day job is that risk is perceived as a problem rather than a tool for success. Risks can be discussed, but not realised they've been discussed, and they're informally and they're never logged or tracked. So our purpose today is to clarify exactly what risk truly means. We're going to encourage early identification and open discussion about risk and build confidence in using the risk log and reporting tools. In terms of what we aim to achieve, we've got a series of objectives. So first of all, we want to understand how proactive risk management supports retrofit delivery. We want to challenge negative perceptions of risk and shift that mindset. We want to learn from examples where well-managed risks can lead into opportunities, and we want to strengthen risk reporting and visibility across projects. So first things first, understanding risk. What is a risk? It's any uncertain event or condition that could impact objectives of a project, whether that be positively or negatively. So, our purpose of risk management is to anticipate and prepare in advance of these risks occurring, not just react to hazards. In terms of early identification, it's really valuable because it can save time, it can save resources on a project. Risks aren't only bad, they can be leveraged for improvement, they can lead to opportunities, and it's something that we should openly discuss amongst our teams. So in terms of what is a risk in comparison to an issue or an assumption, there's often a common confusion between the three. A risk is something that might happen. We're planning ahead in early anticipation, whereas an issue is something that has already happened and we're looking at how we can rectify that. An assumption is something we believe to be true when planning. So we've got some examples on here. A risk would be delays in contractor onboarding may affect retrofit timelines. It's something that could happen, but it's not yet happened. Whereas an issue is the contractor has missed the onboarding deadline. And an assumption would be all contractors will be available in 2 weeks. There's so many different types of risks. They can be split into different categories. So we've got strategic risks. These affect long-term goals and alignment with organizational strategies. So for example, misalignment with sustainability targets, poor stakeholder engagement, or inadequate funding or policy support for a project or program. On another level, we can have operational risks. These arise from day-to-day activities and processes, so disruption to building occupants, access issues in existing structures and buildings, or delays due to unforeseen site conditions. We can have a look at technical risks, which relate to design, engineering, and technology. So compatibility of new systems with old infrastructure. It could be poor workmanship or installation errors or inadequate testing or commissioning. If we're looking at financial risks, these are risks that will impact the costs and financial viability of a project. So budget overruns, unexpected maintenance costs, changes in energy pricing, which affect the return on investment. We have compliance and legal risks. These relate to regulations, standards, and legal obligations. So, for example, non-compliance with building codes, breach of contracts, or health and safety violations. In terms of environmental and sustainability risks, these affect environmental outcomes or sustainability goals. So, poor energy performance post retrofit installation, there could be waste management issues, or the installations could have a negative impact on biodiversity or heritage features. We have reputational risks that affect public perception and trust. So, there could be negative media coverage, resident dissatisfaction, and failure to deliver the promised benefits. And lastly, we have cultural and behavioural risks. These stem from attitudes, values, and behaviours within the organisation or project team. So, common examples again, resistance to change, there's a lack of accountability, or poor communication and collaboration. In terms of common misconceptions, these are things that I've come across in my day-to-day role, which have influenced the need to deliver this workshop today. So it's not a risk if it hasn't happened yet. That is exactly what a risk is. It's the definition of a risk, and we should be planning ahead in how we're going to mitigate this. Another misconception, risks are always negative. Some risks can be turned into opportunities. I've personally worked on projects where the top priority item on our risk register has turned into another project in its whole. Risk management is filling in a risk log. Just a misconception again, it's a continuous process. It should be embedded into our day-to-day work. And another misconception that we can't predict everything. It is true that you can never predict everything, but that shouldn't be used to neglect the need for preparing for uncertainty and having contingency plans in place. Throughout this, we want to try and encourage an open mindset. So risk identification isn't negative, it's professionalism, and it's something that we should be embedding into our day-to-day work. So let's take a look at risk culture and attitudes. Why does risk culture matter? The attitude determines how a risk is recognised, discussed, and reported. And risks are often discussed verbally but not reported. And this is sometimes because people don't necessarily associate them with a risk. It's not a risk if it hasn't happened yet. This is what we covered before as an example. This is an example of reactive thinking. This is where you focus on solving current problems. It's important to do this in the short term, but long term it could have detrimental impacts on a project. Whereas if you approach risk with a proactive mindset, which anticipates uncertainty and is integrated into planning, it helps you manage this better further down the line. We do need a combination of both because it's inevitable that we're going to need to use that reactive mindset when things go wrong. But proactive is really important in trying to prevent them in happening in the first place. So the aim of this session is to shift from reactive only culture to a balanced, resilient thinking pattern. In terms of reframing the concept of risk, it should be neutral. It's not about failure, it's about uncertainty. So we can split this into two sides of dual potential with risks. There's threats and opportunities. Threats are things that can hinder progress, whereas opportunities are things that can improve outcomes. Managing risk means that you need to manage both sides of the uncertainty, and it can be seen as a strategic tool, not just an administrative exercise. Going to look at some examples. So we've got a supply chain delay, which is a risk, may prompt local sourcing innovations, which is a future opportunity. Another risk could be rising material costs, but as an opportunity, this could drive design efficiencies or partnerships. Another risk may be rising energy prices may pose a threat to project costs, but as an opportunity, there's a chance to promote energy efficient retrofits. In terms of Awab's law, this is a piece of legislation that is named after 2-year-old Awab Ishak, who tragically died in 2020 as a result of severe respiratory condition due to prolonged exposure to mold in his home in Rochdale in Greater Manchester. So Awab's parents had complained repeatedly to their social landlord in the 3 years prior to Awab's death, but no action was taken by their social landlord to treat the mould. A coroner's prevention of future deaths report highlighted systematic failures in highlighting and addressing damp and mould. There was public outrage and campaigning led to legislative reform, and Awab's law was introduced through the Social Housing Regulation Act in 2023. The purpose is it establishes legally binding timeframes for landlords to investigate and fix health hazards. It represents a shift towards stronger tenant protections and accountability in the housing sector. If this risk had been addressed prior, then this unfortunate incident may not have occurred. In terms of the key requirements that are set with the law, it's a major regulatory development which is driven by housing safety failures, particularly around damp and mould. It places clear time-bound obligations on landlords and delivery teams to act before risks become life-threatening issues. Previously, there wasn't any fixed legal deadlines for investigations or repairs, and these have been implemented as a result of the legislation. So emergency hazards are addressed within 24 hours. Damp and mould investigations completed within 10 working days. Written finding to tenants are provided within 3 working days. And work started within 5 working days, up to 12 weeks maximum if delays are unavoidable. Alternative accommodation should also be provided if remediation exceeds timeframes. In terms of the regulations, risks and opportunities, so there are obvious risks. So non-compliance, it can lead to serious legal, reputational and operational consequences. The retrofit context amplifies this because poor ventilation or material choices can easily create damp or condensation risks if they're not managed early. But in terms of opportunities, the implementation of this regulation really pushes us towards proactive risk management and inspection, monitoring and communication, all good examples of risk management. It's an opportunity for us to embed higher quality standards, strengthen tenant trust, and show leadership in housing safety. And projects that manage these risks well can become models of best practice for the wider programme. In terms of how this links to today's theme of proactive risk culture, Awab's law illustrates perfectly that risk is neutral. The same regulation can be seen as a threat if we react to it, or an opportunity if we prepare for it. And how we respond to it is what reflects our risk culture, whether we wait to comply or use it as a chance to improve our processes and outcomes. In terms of how to build a proactive risk culture, the first thing is fostering transparency. We want to encourage open conversations about potential risks early on and understand that all stakeholders involved in the project have the same conception of risk. We want to reward curiosity and normalise raising uncertainty. It doesn't mean pessimism. It's a positive thing to raise because it could influence the outcomes of your project. We want to integrate learning and share examples where early risk recognition improved outcomes. This is a strength, it's not a negative, and we want to make sure that that's acknowledged amongst the team. We also want to embed ownership and make risk management a shared responsibility across the team. Highlight and celebrate cases where proactive management leads to success and encourage reflective thinking. So, for example, when did early risk identification help your project? These are all really important if you want a proactive risk management culture. You need transparency, collaboration, and learning, and this needs to be communicated across the team involved. So let's talk risk. I'm going to open the floor to discussion, looking for experiences around these 3 questions. So I'll read them all out and then we'll go through them one at a time. So we've got, what is the current attitude toward risk in your organisation? How does this affect your ability to manage projects effectively? And can you think of a moment where a risk you raised helped prevent a bigger issue? Is there anyone which would like to come to the floor and discuss?
You can either pop a message in the chat or I've unmuted your microphones as well, so feel free.
I think while we're waiting, maybe I can share an example. Again, this doesn't directly relate to retrofit, but while we're talking about proactive risk management and risk culture, it's a good example to share. So we were restoring a building, and behind the building was a slope, a really large, steep, unstable slope, and we identified a flooding risk, and there was a possibility that this flooding risk was going to have a threat on the newly restored building, which we'd spent a lot of money doing up, a lot of time, a lot of care went into it. So we did some early stage investigations into the source of the flooding risk. We discovered that it was actually a Georgian water management system, which we didn't know about, and we turned that into an opportunity to develop a whole new project. We had a re-landscaping project which took place. We invited the community and we wanted to make it a place that was a community hub for the town. So a really good example of where acknowledging that risk early on was turned into an amazing opportunity for another project to emerge. Anyone
I'll
got-
add one. Yeah, I'll add one risk. Basically, we're doing an EWI project, so that's a major investment. Also minor works like, say, fan installations and door undercuts, etc. So one of the risks identified during the demonstration to wave 1 to wave 2 was that if we do the major works, which is the EWI, and we can't get back in to do the fans, then the ventilation strategies put at risk. So the solution was to do the minor work measures first to ensure that the investment was there ready to benefit from the outcome, and the EWI was secondary or the last element. So the major investment will follow in.
Absolutely. Phasing and sequencing can be a really key tool in order of reducing risk or managing it in separate phases. Is there anyone else, or should we move on to the next slide? I'll move on then. Okay. So in terms of proactive risk management, we've highlighted how important it is, but what are we going to do to embed it into our culture? So creating a risk register or a risk log, it's a structured document that helps you track and manage risks throughout the life cycle of a project or initiative. It should be updated regularly and reviewed with the team rather than a document that is produced and then not looked at for a period of time. In terms of what a typical risk register includes, there would be a risk ID, which is a unique identifier for each risk, a description, which is a brief explanation of the risk, a likelihood, which is an estimate of how likely the risk is to occur, example, low, medium, or high. You could also add quantitative figures to this to provide you with red, amber, green ratings. An impact of the risk, which is an assessment of the potential consequences. Again, are the consequences low or the medium or high? You could use these to calculate a risk score, which is the likelihood multiplied by the impact. Every risk should have an owner that is responsible for monitoring and managing the risk, but it's also important that the whole team on board are sighted of these risks and have a duty of care in embedding risk management. You would include a mitigation strategy. So what are you going to do to reduce or eliminate the risk, and a status of whether the risk is open, closed, or being monitored. You should encourage your team to treat the risk log as a live document. It should be reviewed regularly and updated as new risks emerge or existing ones continue to evolve. Just included a little sample of a risk register, so let's have a look at this. It's tailored to a retrofit project. So The table shows how we can document and manage risks in a clear, structured way, and each row represents a specific risk that could impact the success of the project. So, for example, if we look in the risk ID column, R002 highlights the risk of discovering asbestos during the strip out phase. Now, this is a common issue in older buildings and can cause significant delays and health concerns if it's not managed properly. In this case, the mitigation strategy is to conduct a pre-works asbestos survey and have a licensed contractor ready to carry out the removal if needed. Another example is the risk of unexpected structural issues. So these can arise once work begins and might not be visible during the initial inspections. So to mitigate this, it's important to include a contingency in the budget and schedule early structural assessments. We also have risks which are related to resident access, supply chain disruptions, inaccurate building documentation. Each of these has a designated owner and a clear mitigation strategy. For instance, if residents need access during the works, the community liaison officer should communicate the schedule clearly and offer alternative routes. Risk identification we're going to be looking at in this slide, and this is the process of determining potential risks that could impact the success of a retrofit project. There are several techniques we can use to identify these risks. So one of them being brainstorming, which involves team discussions to generate a list of possible risks. Root cause analysis, where we're digging into deeper, understand the underlying cause of the risks. We could do a SWOT analysis, which is where we look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats to understand the full picture of the situation. We could also participate in expert interviews. Consulting with industry experts and stakeholders can provide you with really valuable insights and checklists. So using standardized lists to help ensure that the common risks aren't overlooked. If we combine all these approaches, then we can build a really comprehensive understanding of potential challenges early on in the project. In terms of risk assessment and prioritization, you could color code it. So your low risk could be green, medium could be yellow, and high could be critical. You can see here when I said about quantifying the likelihood and impact, this can help you produce this table. It's a risk matrix and it is simple, but it's a really powerful tool because it can help you assess and prioritize risks based on likelihood and impact. It helps teams visualize which risk needs immediate attention and which can be monitored over time. Likelihood, it refers to how probable it is the risk will occur, could be rated as low, medium or high, and impact refers to the severity of the consequences. So if the risk does occur, it could be typically rated as low, medium or high. When we combine the two dimensions in a grid, we get a matrix, and this allows us to categorize the risks. So for example, a risk that is both highly likely and highly impactful would fall into the top right corner of the matrix, a red zone, which means it would require immediate action. Going to have a look at a few case studies because risk doesn't always lead to negative outcomes, and when it's managed well, it can create space for innovation, stronger relationships and better project results. In this section, we're going to explore examples where risks were identified early and turned into opportunities. So, case study 1 is site inspections, acting quickly to protect quality. Our scenario, so during a retrofit project, a grant recipient conducting a routine site inspection identified that insulation was being installed incorrectly, which had a risk of long-term performance and non-compliance. In response, the grant recipient immediately paused the works, raised the issue with the delivery team, and arranged for the faulty installation to be rectified. In some cases, this included appointing a new supplier to ensure that quality standards were met. The outcome of this, it did cause short-term delays, but the project remained within the overall programme timeframe. More importantly, the intervention protected the integrity of the retrofit and avoided future remedial costs. The lessons learned that we can take away: quick action during delivery can prevent small issues from becoming major setbacks. Quality assurance is a key part of risk management. Let's look at case study number 2. So this is planning risk and early engagement with local authorities. In this scenario, grant recipients working on hard to treat or locally valued buildings recognised early on that planning permission could be a barrier, especially for external finishes or changes to visible elevations. In response, rather than waiting for issues to arise, they initiated early discussion with their local planning authorities. By exploring alternative finishes or adjusting design elements, they were able to avoid triggering formal planning requirements altogether. The outcome of this was a proactive approach, which meant they saved time, reduced uncertainty, and allowed works to proceed without delay. It also strengthened their relationship with local authorities. And the lessons learned took away from this is that engaging early with stakeholders can help navigate complex risks and unlock practical solutions. Case study 3, we're looking at design and structural risks. So the scenario here, a grant recipient suspected that the structural drawings for a retrofit site were outdated and might not reflect hidden conditions. In response, they commissioned a detailed site survey before finalising the design. The survey revealed structural elements that would have conflicted with the proposed layout. As an outcome, the design was adjusted early and avoided costly redesigns and program delays. And the lessons learnt taken away from this was that investing in early investigation can uncover hidden risks and lead to a more efficient delivery period. Case study 4, this is our last one, and this is about mobilisation and overlooking team changes at DAC stage. So this is an example which applies to the local grant scheme. During the DAC phase of a retrofit project, it became clear that a team member who was responsible for coordinating contractor mobilisation and early site setup was planning to leave. However, the team did not treat this as a risk because the departure of the member of staff hadn't yet happened. The response when the team member left unexpectedly, the project experienced delays in contractor onboarding and early stage coordination. The grant recipient quickly reassessed the situation, escalated the issue, and appointed a temporary replacement while recruiting a permanent one. The outcome, although the project lost momentum briefly, the grant recipient's quick response helped stabilise delivery and avoid longer-term disruption. The experience led to a change in team continuity risks were assessed during the DAC and mobilisation. The lesson learned from this is that staff changes, even anticipated ones, should always be treated as active risks. The DAC stage for local grant is a critical opportunity to flag and plan for these risks before they impact delivery. From the case studies and wider experience, we looked at several key lessons learned. Early identification is absolutely critical, and spotting risks early allows the team to take corrective action before issues escalate. Whether it's planning constraints or installation errors, early awareness gives you options. Quality assurance, it protects long-term outcomes. So routine site inspections and technical checks are absolutely essential. Catching mistakes during delivery can prevent costly remedial works and safeguard building performance as well. Proactive stakeholder engagement. This is really important. Engaging with local planning authorities, residents, suppliers before problems arise helps build trust and avoid delays. Open communication is a powerful risk management tool. Flexibility in delivery. It can preserve program timelines, even when risks cause short-term disruption. Having contingency plans like switching suppliers or adjusting designs can keep projects on track. Collaboration strengthens resilience, so sharing lessons learned across teams and projects helps everyone to improve. Risk management is most effective when it's a shared responsibility and not a solo task. And lastly here, we've got design decisions can reduce regulatory risk. Thoughtful design choices, such as selecting finishes that don't require planning permission, can help avoid regulatory delays and keep projects moving forward. Going to go through a little summary of what we've covered today and a few key points to take away from today's session. Risk management is a proactive mindset. It's not just a process. It's not just about filling out forms and reacting to problems. It's about staying ahead of potential issues by actively thinking about what could go wrong and what can be done about it before it happens. A well-maintained risk log is a powerful tool for visibility and accountability. When risks are clearly documented and regularly updated, everyone knows what's being tracked, who's responsible, and what actions are underway. It helps keep teams aligned and ensures nothing slips through the cracks. Risk can be opportunities in disguise when managed effectively. Some risks, when spotted early, can lead to better solutions, stronger relationships, or smarter ways of working. Managing risk well can actually improve outcomes, not just project against failure. And sharing experiences and learning from others will always strengthen our collective resilience. When we talk openly about risks, what worked, what didn't, we help each other grow. This shared learning builds confidence and helps teams handle future challenges more effectively. In terms of resources, Ian's going to share these slides, but these are some of the relevant RISE on-demand sources related to risk and risk management. They can also be available through the RISE webpage. When you are provided with the PowerPoint, click on the links to head over to the YouTube videos or past masterclasses or the podcasts on the right-hand side.